Hello, welcome back to my channel. This is the first video that I'm filming since giving birth. So I'm a mum now, which is so exciting. My baby is 7 weeks old while I'm filming this. And I have made the decision to keep my baby off social media completely, so I'm not going to be sharing on here or on Instagram anything really other than my own like postpartum journey. I'm still in the very early days and weeks of being a mum, so don't necessarily expect there to be consistent weekly content on here. I'm gonna upload still when I can, but I'm not like committing myself to sticking to a schedule 100%. But I thought for my first video back I would film a birth story of like how it all went. So I hope you enjoy. I'm just gonna pull up my notes because it was 7 weeks ago now and I was very tired and it's a bit of a blur, but I did make some notes like in the day or two after I gave birth, so hopefully this is like as close to what actually happened as possible. It was a fairly positive birth experience in the end. I was very worried about how it was all going to go. It was like the thing that I was the most worried about in terms of like pregnancy and being a mum and everything, but honestly it was a lot quicker and a lot easier than I expected. Not to say that it was quick or easy, but just quicker and easier than I thought it would be. So I was 38 weeks and 2 days pregnant when my water broke, and I spent the first probably half hour after it broke trying to figure out if that's what had happened or not, because I wasn't sure, because it wasn't like a big gush, so it was very confusing. So let me set the scene for you. On this day we had the carpets being replaced, so we had all of the furniture from our bedroom was shoved into like our walk-in wardrobe and our ensuite, with my hospital bag at the very back of the walk-in wardrobe, which we couldn't really get to because it was past like the bed and, you know, all our other furniture. And then all of our lounge furniture was in the kitchen. That's what was happening on the day, and we had the carpet layers in our bedroom and our lounge doing that, and Jonathan and I were kind of like in the other parts of the house leaving them to do their thing. I started noticing that I was filling my pads. Like, I wasn't wearing proper pads, but I was wearing like the panty liners for the last part of pregnancy, so I started noticing that I was like making that a lot more wet than usual. And so I was like, has my water broken? Probably not. This is probably just a late pregnancy thing. So we were telling ourselves it was fine. And I was like, I'm not sure, because this is different from how it has been up till now. So we were looking it up on the internet. Midwife had said not to call her unless, you know, something much more serious had happened. So I didn't call the midwife, but we were looking online and it said, if you think your water's broken, then lie down for half an hour, and when you get up, if there's a gush, then your water's broken. So I was like, cool, I'm just gonna lie down on the couch with Jonathan for half an hour and we'll see what happens. I lay down for like 2 minutes and there was a massive gush. We were like, okay, yep, water's broken. So I like waddled myself up to the toilet. I was messaging Jonathan saying, can you bring me one of the adult nappies from the hospital bag, which of course was like hidden behind all of our furniture, shoved in the wardrobe past the guys that were doing the carpet. So Jonathan had a great time trying to find that for me. So anyway, that was 1 o'clock in the afternoon that my water broke. I looked at my notes from the midwife and it said if I was strep B negative, then I didn't need to call her when my water broke, but if I was strep B positive, then I did need to call her. But I had only had the strep B test quite recently at this point, and I hadn't had the results, so I didn't know if it was positive or negative at this stage. So I called her just to find out what my strep B results were. And she said that they were negative, so that was fine. When your water breaks, the chance of infection starts to rise. So basically you have about 24 hours before doctors want to start kind of getting things going if they don't get going on their own after your water break. So the midwife said, oh, it's fine, like you'll be home for the night, just make sure your hospital bag is packed and ready to go. You'll probably be home for most of tomorrow morning as well, and then we'll kind of get you into hospital at some point tomorrow if things haven't like started on their own. So I was like, sweet. My hospital bag was packed at that point. I think I'd packed it like 2 days before this. So we figured, you know, once the carpet people were done, we'd put all the furniture back and then we'd spend the night, and then, you know, the next day we'd be heading into hospital to have the baby. So I was on the lookout for contractions because I had read that they usually start on their own after your water breaks. So I was waiting for them to start, and about 5:30 I started feeling like kind of mild period-like cramps, which I was really pleased about because I wanted everything to kind of get going naturally if possible. I didn't want to be like waiting 24 hours with nothing happening and then the hospital inducing me the next day. So as soon as I started feeling period cramps, I was like, oh, hopefully these are contractions. This is great. Because they do start really kind of subtle. Obviously they build up over time. So those first few, you're like, is this contractions? I don't really know. Like, it's just a really mild pain. Jonathan had band practice that night and we had kind of gone back and forth all day with whether or not he was going to go. And it was shortly after my contractions started, well, like the first ones that I felt, that he was due to leave. And I told him he should go because it was going to be the last one he got to go to for a while. And of course my contractions had only just started and I was convinced I was going to have like probably 24 hours at least of contractions before the baby came. So I told him to go to band practice. He was just going to keep his phone on loud and I would call him if I needed him to come home quickly. And I just told him like, don't hang around with the guys after band practice, just once you finish, come straight home. So he went to band practice. I remember I called my sister. I usually call her at like 8 o'clock because I know then her kids have usually like gone to bed by then. So I think I called her around 8 o'clock, and at that point I was timing my contractions. They weren't super painful, but I was just, you know, I had a timer on one of my apps and I was just clicking the button every time they started and stopped. And then after I called my sister, I called Jonathan's mum as well because we hadn't been able to get hold of her before he went to band practice. So that was probably around 8:30 that I called his mum, just to let her know that like water had broken, contractions had started, and baby was coming like soonish. I went to bed straight after that because I was going to try and get a good night's sleep, or at least a good rest if I couldn't sleep, because it was still quite early for me to go to sleep. So I was in bed watching Stranger Things, I think. I got like 10 minutes into the episode. I stopped to time a contraction, and that was the first one that was like really quite painful. And then Jonathan called me on his way home, which I think was just after this contraction. So it would have been just after like 9 o'clock, maybe 9:15 or something. And so he stayed on the phone with me the whole way home. I had several contractions while he was on his way home and I was timing all of them. And of course, one of the things that midwife tells you to check for is whether or not you can talk through the contraction, because you're not supposed to call them and let them know until you can't talk through contractions. So every time I had a contraction, Jonathan was like, are you still talking? And every time I'd be like, yes, I'm talking. But by that point they were really painful and it was hard to talk through them, but I was still able to do it. So Jonathan picked up some McDonald's on the way home. By the time he got home, I was feeling quite sick actually. Like in between the contractions, I felt really sick. And so I tried to eat a few chips, but I wasn't really feeling the best. I just thought it would be good to like give myself some energy because I figured I was gonna need it to get this baby out. So I ate some chips and then threw them up a couple of contractions later. At about 10 o'clock, I hopped in the shower because I had found the hot water from the shower really helpful in like the last few weeks of my pregnancy. So I figured if it helped with that, then it would probably help with the contractions. So I hopped in the shower and it was really nice actually, and it made the contractions much more bearable. I think initially I was like standing with the water hitting my back, like kind of just leaning against the shower door. And then when they started to get even more painful, which is probably like, I want to say like half an hour later, I ended up on all fours on the floor of the shower, still with the water hitting my back, and just kind of trying to breathe through the contractions. At this point, I'm not sure if I was still talking through them or not. I've written here unbearable from 11-ish, and I was just hating it. So I guess I had been in the shower for an hour. My timings might be a little bit off, but yeah, around 11, I guess, I was really struggling. Like, I was at the point where I was about to say I can't do this, but I didn't say it because I knew I had no choice. Like, we weren't at hospital, it wasn't time to go to hospital. I didn't want to say I can't do this when, like, in my mind it was only going to get worse from here, and I still had to endure like hours more of this. So I was like, you have to do this. Like, don't even go there, don't even say it, because you have no choice. But also, like, at this point I'd been in the shower a really long time, and I was worried because it was only going to get worse from here, but also hot water only lasts so long. So at some point, I think around this time, I started turning the water off in between contractions, and I would just turn it on when I had contractions to try and get the water to last, because I was like, what the heck am I going to do when we run out of hot water? So at this point, we were like, wow, this has progressed a lot faster than we thought it was going to. Like, I thought I was going to have those kind of mild contractions for a few hours, but here we are at 11 o'clock and it's really, really painful. I said to Jonathan, just, you know, leave me, I'm okay in the shower, go and finish the hospital bags, because I had packed like the general stuff, but I hadn't packed any of the last minute stuff like the toothbrushes and the change of underwear and, you know, all those kind of bits and pieces. So Jonathan went probably only for about 10 minutes to go finish the hospital bag. I noticed a little bit of blood in the shower. My notes from the midwife, I had written down that like a little bit of blood was okay, period amount of blood was not okay, but I wasn't sure if it was like an okay amount or a not okay amount. So it says here at about midnight we called the midwife again because we needed to ask about the blood, because we just weren't sure. Jonathan was a bit scared that he could see blood, so was I. So we called the midwife and she said it wasn't too concerning. She asked about like the contraction pattern and stuff, and she said the contractions sounded like they were doing well, but we needed to go for at least another hour at that point. So that was about midnight, and I think around then was when we ran out of hot water, and I was I was so upset because I didn't know how I was going to manage without the hot water. But anyway, I went to bed, figured I would try and get as much rest as I could, because at this point it seemed like I was obviously not going to be able to sleep through the night. Like, my contractions, I think, were about 3 to 4 minutes apart at this point. That's what I've written anyway. And they were lasting for a minute. So I was only getting a break of like 2 to 3 minutes in between contractions, which is never going to be long enough to sleep properly. So I was lying in bed and Jonathan was like scratching my back, because I find that really relaxing. So that was helping me to like doze off a little bit in between contractions. And that must have gone on for close to an hour, because the next thing that I've written down is for 1 o'clock in the morning. So at 1 a.m. I had a contraction, as I had been, except that this one, my body told me to push, and my body just started pushing. Like, I had no control over it. It was doing it itself, and I was trying really hard not to, because I was like, no, I'm at home. I am not giving birth to this baby at home with no medical people around me. But yeah, my body just decided that that was one where I was going to push, and I could feel like stinging on my perineum. And I was just like, I freaked out. I was like, I do not want to have this baby with like no one here to help. Like, no medical people here to help. So we called the midwife again and told her that that had happened, and she said, okay, go to hospital. So we piled ourselves into the car. I was really worried about having contractions in the car, actually, because I had heard from other people's like birth vlogs and stuff that that is one of the most painful places to be when you're having contractions. But honestly, I think I had like 3 in the car on the way to the hospital, and they weren't as bad as I thought they were going to be. So we got to the hospital at about 1:20 in the morning. The midwife wasn't there yet. Actually, it was funny. They wheeled me up in a wheelchair. We like arrived at the hospital at the exact same time as another pregnant lady, and she was like doubled over in pain. And so they put her in a wheelchair, and they asked me if I wanted a wheelchair as well. And I was like, oh, no, I probably don't need one. So I was like looking at her and I was like, obviously I'm not in as much pain as her. I'm probably here too early, because at this point, you know, I'd only been having contractions for like 7 hours. So I didn't want to like milk the situation. But then I was like, if I'm not going to milk the situation when I'm in labor, then when am I? So I was like, yeah, fine, put me in a wheelchair. So they put me in a wheelchair, wheeled me up to my room. Probably got there a lot faster than we would have if I'd tried to walk. So I think that was a good decision in the end. So because my midwife wasn't there, one of the like just nurses that was on duty came to check us in. She asked like about my contractions and timings and stuff, and based on that she said we were probably there too early. And I was like, yeah, I know, like I haven't really been in labor for that long, but my midwife told me to come, so I'm here. She was like, that's fine, we'll get you some gas and air. So the gas and air, now I've heard that some people feel sick with the gas and air. I didn't feel sick, but it also didn't really help. I think it's more of a distraction method, but the way that it works, it was just so annoying. So it was like a little tube, and you can like hold it away from your face and then just use it when you are having contractions. It's just like a tube that you breathe through, but it's almost like they've got a massive filter blocking it, because I had to work so hard to breathe through this tube. Jonathan said that that's probably part of like the distraction, like distracting you from the pain, but it was just so frustrating to like be in pain from the contractions, plus then having to work really hard to even breathe through the stupid tube. I don't know if it was worth it. I used it for as long as I was allowed to through all of my contractions, but honestly, I don't think it helped. I think I would have been exactly the same without it, to be honest. I think my midwife got there around 2 o'clock, and she was just like talking to me and putting all her gear on and stuff like that. She didn't check me until about 2:30, so at this point Jonathan and I had been at the hospital for about an hour. So 2:30 she checked me for the first time, and I was expecting her to say that I was like 3 or 4 centimeters dilated. And she checked me and I was fully dilated, and she was like, I can feel the head is right there, you're basically ready to go. And I just freaked out, because I had gone back and forth during the pregnancy with whether or not I would want an epidural. Obviously the pros of an epidural are that it's less painful. The cons, in my opinion anyway, the cons were that I was more likely to tear if I had an epidural, because I wouldn't be able to feel exactly when to push as easily, which would then make my recovery harder. So those were my pros and cons for the epidural. But like my biggest fear, because I wanted to wait and see how I felt when I was in labor, and my biggest fear was that I would miss my opportunity. I would have that choice taken away from me by being too far along by the time I got checked. And that's exactly what happened. So I swore. As soon as she told me I was fully dilated and ready to go, I just swore. I was like, I've missed the epidural, haven't I? And she was like, yep, you have. I was freaking out. She needed to finish some like paperwork and stuff, and I was just freaking out about the fact that I was gonna have to do this without an epidural. Jonathan was amazing the whole time. He was by my side every second. I must have been so annoying, because I remember like through all of this, like through all of the contractions, even like from right at the start, he would try to like rub my back and I'd be like, no, get off me. And then so he would stop, and then I'd be like, no, but do something else. It was like I kept flip-flopping between what I wanted and what I didn't want. And it changed every contraction as well. So like one contraction I wanted my back rubbed, and then the next contraction I didn't want to be touched at all. And of course, like as they got stronger, I kind of became worse at communicating. So it was just me kind of like flapping his hand away, things like that. So he was a saint, honestly, just so patient with me. doing everything that I needed. So anyway, I was freaking out. He was trying to calm me down, or like keep me as calm as possible. So at 3 o'clock a.m. the midwife said, we're going to start pushing. I'm going to take your gas and air away. I don't know why we had to take gas and air away, but we did. So I pushed with no pain relief at all. So yeah, it started at 3 in the morning. So with each contraction I would push, and I had the same feeling that I had with that one contraction at home where my body just decided to push for me, which is great because I don't think, you know, when I was doing it on my own, I don't think I was pushing enough. But my body literally just took over. It was the most bizarre thing. My body completely took over and pushed for me. Like, I had no choice. Honestly, it was so painful. If my body hadn't decided to do it on its own, I don't know that I would have gotten the baby out. I mean, obviously at some point I would have gotten the baby out, but like I was not good at willingly pushing through the pain. I was only able to do it because it was like my body took my choice away for that as well. So that happened. I thought it was going to take a couple of hours because, you know, it was my first baby, and everything usually just takes longer with your first baby. So like this whole time I expected the contractions to start later. I expected the contractions to take longer to progress. I expected to not be dilated as fast as I was, and then I expected the pushing to take longer than it did. But my baby was born at 3:41, so I pushed for like 40 minutes. I feel like I'm saying this in such an anticlimactic way, like yeah, and then my baby was born. I was just so relieved that there were no complications. Like in my pregnancy there were no complications, in my labor there were no complications, and I mean even now luckily we've had the baby for 7 weeks and they have had no complications in that time. So I'm just so grateful for how everything happened in the end. Oh, and I had no complications postpartum either, so I'm grateful for that as well. But yeah, so I got the baby out at 3:41. One thing that did surprise me while I was pushing with each contraction. So every time there was a contraction, I would do like 2 or 3 big pushes, and then we'd stop and wait for the next contraction. The one where I got the head out, I thought that once the head was out, I would pause and rest and then wait for the next contraction to get the body out. But I got the head out, and then my midwife was like, cool, now go again. And I was like, what? After doing like the most painful part, you don't want me to rest? You want me to just keep going immediately and push the body out? So that was a real shock for me. I really thought I was going to get a couple of minutes to rest in between. But no. So it was like push, 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 do the absolute most painful part, which is getting the head out, and then just keep going and get the body out as well. Honestly, just the feeling of the head coming out and then the body as well, just the relief as it came out was like insane. So once the baby was born, obviously that's not quite the end of labor, so the midwife let me have the gas back so that she could do the local anesthetic to give me some stitches. I only had tiny tears, like I think she said it was 1 stitch in like 2 or 3 different places, so really, really minor tears, but she still needed to do a couple of stitches. So she gave me anesthetic so that I wouldn't feel the stitches as much. But honestly, ugh, a needle going in there, not good, not good, not good. So that was one of the very much not fun parts. But yeah, baby was on my chest. I was having my first cuddles, so I just tried to focus on that and not think about the anesthetic and then the stitches while they were happening. Honestly, for 3 stitches or whatever it was, it took a really long time. I wasn't timing it. I don't know how long exactly it took, but it felt like it was close to half an hour that she took to stitch me up. It probably wasn't, but yeah. Oh, and then the last thing that I've written on here, I've already talked about, no complications for me or baby. I've written here they didn't need drips or anything. Well, neither of us needed drips or anything. The reason I wrote that down is because I've seen a lot of people that I follow on social media sharing their like labor and delivery stories, or they'll share photos of their baby in the hospital with medical equipment that they've needed, for example drips, or you know, anything else that they may need. And the sight of a tiny newborn baby with that kind of thing attached to them, like a drip or an oxygen mask or anything, just looks so scary because they're so little and they're so fragile. I think it would have broken my heart to see my baby with like needing anything. So I'm just so grateful that my baby didn't need anything. They were absolutely fine. I've written here the Apgar Score, which I don't know if other countries use Apgar Score, and I don't really understand exactly like all the ins and outs of it, but it's basically a health and wellness check that they do immediately when the baby's born, and then also I think 10 minutes later. So the first score was a 9 out of 10, and then the 10 minutes later one was a 10 out of 10. So basically as good as it gets. Apparently most babies average like a 7 or an 8. So the fact that my baby got a 9 and then a 10 is just perfect. So honestly, just so happy that like nothing went wrong. Everything went so smoothly. Some of my biggest fears actually happened during labor, like the missing the epidural part. Even though that happened, it was all so much quicker than I thought it would be, and obviously I'm glad that like the labor's done, and I was glad as soon as it was over, but it was a lot better than I thought it would be, because just labor in general was a huge fear of mine because of the unknown and because of all of the complications that can happen, all the things that can go wrong for myself and for baby. Like I was worried about all of it. And yeah, nothing went wrong and I was just so relieved. I guess that's all there is to say. That was my birth story. I think the next video that I'll be filming will be a postpartum and newborn essentials. So if you're interested, then hopefully that's coming next week. But as you know, it may be a couple weeks off. I'm not on a set schedule right now, so it'll appear when it appears. But thank you for watching today's video. I hope you're having a great day, and I will see you again next time. Bye!